Hello, everyone. Welcome in to the June 11th version of the IDP Plus Offseason Mailbag Show. I'm Justin Frye. Welcome back. Sorry it's been a little bit. Unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, I had a sick toddler, and last week I was off traveling for work. So been a couple weeks since been able to get on and chop it up with you guys. Excited to be back. As always, I'm available on X at JFriedP. You can reach all of our amazing staff, writers, content creators through the IDP Plus Discord. Join the website, hop on the Discord server. You get access to everyone all the time, answers to questions in real time. And as always, ask questions. If you have questions during the week, shoot them into mailbag at idpguys.org. Send them in as we hop on the live stream, which, hey, Sean, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's good to be back. So unfortunately, I didn't see any emails come in this week. So we will just hop into some news. So it's a kind of a slow period, kind of not. Not a ton of great news content cycling right now. A lot of stuff you'll hear. It was like a week ago, I think Justin Jefferson got his bag of money. Which, that's great news for him. Great news for JJ McCarthy. Great news for receivers in general, how much he got paid. So love seeing that. T. Higgins is not at mandatory minicamp this week. He's the only player in the NFL who's really allowed to hold out right now. Since he hasn't signed his franchise tender, the team can't fine him. Like the Jets are fining Aaron Rodgers and Hassan Reddick for not being at Jets camp. Not too worried about with Rodgers. He's been there all offseason. Reddick's an interesting one. The Jets traded for him and didn't give him any new money. So I'm not really sure what they were expecting when he didn't want to play for the Eagles for the money that they had on the books. They trade for him and don't expect to give him a new deal. I assume at some point they'll probably add a little extra money to his existing deal rather than extending him, but we'll see. Let's see. Anything else? Marcus May to the Dolphins. Like I said, pretty slow period for additions, but May in Miami, solid depth. Maybe he's there starting free safety this year. And probably by the time we get back on next week, Ramondre Stevenson will have his extension done. It's a good time to buy him. I don't know. I don't think I brought him up in the buys and sells 3 weeks ago. I think I talked about Kendry Miller as a buy. But especially if you're in a title window, they're implementing the Browns offense in New England. They're either going to play Jacoby Brissett, who's kind of a journeyman, and you don't want him to throw a ton, or a rookie who you also don't want to throw a ton. So I would expect him to walk into a lot of carries. They're working on the O-line, and I think it was PFF put out this morning that the Patriots' strength of schedule for running backs is the easiest in the NFL this season. So Stevenson should have a very good year. I'm excited as a Pats fan to watch him probably have the best year of his career this year. Hopefully they get a signed an extension first. With that, we'll hop on down and start talking about Trophy Smack. So Trophy Smack, it's draft season, folks. Get ahead of the game right now with Trophy Smack's gorgeous draft boards, complete with player stickers, so deep you couldn't possibly need them all. And for the first time, Trophy Smack has an IDP expansion pack for all of us defensive nerds. Check out the link in the show notes and get yours today. All right, so with the slow piece of offseason, we're going to talk a little Dynasty theory. So, apologies. Really just kind of diving into how to construct a roster, what you want to look for, how to kind of build a trade, and just kind of talk through some thoughts that I have on Dynasty and help hopefully you become a better Dynasty manager. So I'll start off with a lot of it kind of depends on where you're at with your league, I will say. So the initial phase, you kind of have to do a little bit of a feeling out. You go through a startup draft and you really don't know who's going to compete, who's not. Occasionally you'll see a couple obvious ones who aren't going to compete. But as you get a couple years into your league, you start seeing the clear haves and have-nots and the guys that are constantly trying to rebuild, collect rookie picks, and probably care more about the idea of their team than the actual winning. It's a hard concept, especially early. I haven't been doing Dynasty for a very long time. It's been, I don't know, 6-ish years maybe. And I definitely started off more on the realm of trying to collect rookies, build this crazy dynasty that everyone chases, but is essentially, it's pretty hard to do. I'll be honest. Even best dynasty managers, you run into the playoffs, get unlucky one week, a couple of your stars don't have good weeks, and you lose like to a 6 seed or an 8 seed or whatever, however deep your league is. And it's just frustrating. There's been a few leagues where I've felt like I've had the best team for, I don't know, 3 years running, and I'm not sure I've made the finals in that league, just run into poor injury luck. So I tend to use that and build more depth than necessarily a super top heavy team. But that's kind of specific to each dynasty manager. It also depends a little bit on league size. I'm a little more interested in stars, more stars, the shallower the league. You get to like a 16-teamer, yes, you want stars, and you want to make certain key positions. But like if you've got just like a running back or two and you're starting one or two and you've got some bench guys that are RB2s on their own team, like it doesn't feel great going into the year, but you typically work the waiver wire, work some trades, get guys to fill in for a week here or there and kind of make it through a year with what the community would kind of tell you is a weak running back room. So it's all kind of how you build that team a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about roster construction. So a lot of this is kind of variable based on what your league looks like. What are your starting lineup requirements? What do your players, what are their scoring settings? How many quarterbacks are you starting as a super flex league? Do you start one IDP flex? Do you play a full lineup of IDPs? Like, for instance, I'm in a 32-team dynasty, crazy, but where you start 7 offensive players and 4 defensive players. And it frustrates the heck out of me because on the defensive side, whoever set it up where you're running 2 linebackers and 2 IDP flexes. So everyone just hoards linebackers. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with like a stable of defensive linemen that are all really good, but not necessarily linebacker eligible. And so it's just infuriating to having to adjust at times to make that work. So paying attention, making sure that, those people who have 8 or 9 linebackers, they're sitting real pretty to just throw linebackers in and week out. And also how you construct trades within that gets influenced because I've been able to trade linebackers for offensive players, which obviously was starting 7 offensive players when there's only 6 skill guys on the field for any given team. Like that's something you would like to do. But at the same time, then I'm weak linebacker. It's just how you build that. You've got to kind of constantly feel like you're chasing certain spots. So all that to say, just pay attention to your league settings. Pay attention to scoring, bonuses. Is there a tight end premium? Is it a super flex? And understand the replacement values of players. If you have two high-end quarterbacks in a super flex, are you really going to spend a high draft pick to pick a third quarterback? Do you need one? I mean, if you're picking highly because your quarterback's got hurt or something, I mean, maybe you pivot and take the receiver, even though a lot of people will say prioritize the quarterback. Yeah, it's just, Dynasty's not easy. Sorry, I lost track there for a second. One big thing to do, obviously, is if you're able to hit on guys before they break out, if you, for instance, bought CeeDee Lamb last offseason rather than trying to buy him this offseason, something like that, then you can sit pretty for the future. And it's possible to see some of those guys coming, depending on situation, team construction, the moves the teams are making. The Cowboys were saying all last year that they wanted to run the ball a little more. They wanted to run the ball more, but they never really did anything to help them be able to run the ball more. So what they were doing didn't really match what they were saying, and you could kind of guess that they would have to throw the ball, but they didn't really add much. I mean, Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup were their second and third receivers. Ferguson was a solid breakout last year, but because you could see Dak likes to target his tight ends. So while they drafted Schoonmaker, I mean, Ferguson was the one to target. Similar, I think, to what the Giants are doing. A lot of people might prioritize Theo Johnson. I'm probably more on the Daniel Bellinger side, but for the most part right now, I'm kind of staying away a little bit from the Giants with one exception. And that's kind of, we're talking about buying in bad situations. Trading high on talent, like people talk about buy low, sell high, all this stuff. Sometimes you have to buy high. Like Malik Neighbors is in a bad situation. It could be kind of similar to Garrett Wilson, where he kind of struggles the first 2 years. But at the end of the day, I don't think his dynasty value is going to drop. So if you are waiting and hoping to buy the quote dip on Neighbors, I mean, Garrett Wilson never really dipped all that much when you stop and think about it. People saw the talent. They were always just like, well, when he gets a better quarterback, he'll be much better. And so it's hard to sit here and be like, just wait for Neighbors to value to die off in a year or two a little bit. So he's, instead of being, wide receiver 10, he's wide receiver 20 and easier to buy. Good players only have to show flashes, and everyone can make the excuse that, they're going to get better. So I pulled a few guys off of Keep Trade Cut that could have the potential to break out. I mean, a few of them we've been talking about for a while. Jalen Waddle's wide receiver 10, that actually went up fairly recently since he signed his extension. I think he's above Tyreek Hill. I think Hill's now wide receiver 12. So if you're in a title window, Hill's a pretty good buy for a couple of years. But if you're looking for that next breakout, I mean, Waddle last year, everything when he was on the field looked great. He's had some issues with health. So it's a little hit and miss. He had a much higher yardage total 2 years ago than he did last year. So he's just a little more volatile. Right now, he's better off as your wide receiver 2. Same with Chris Olave, who's wide receiver 13 on Keep Trade Cut, and Drake London is wide receiver 13. All of them have just massive upside. London's my favorite buy of the group, but all of them, for varying reasons, have seen something change. Waddle got the contract. Olave's got a new OC that hopefully will use him more than just down the field on targets that actually let him run some of the underneath routes. I know yards after the catch isn't his forte, but I do think he can do it. And if the coach's staff allows him to, you could potentially have a star receiver in Olave. London's the easy case. He got the wide receiver upgrade, assuming Cousins is healthy. And even better, as a dynasty manager, they drafted Michael Penix in the top 10, which everyone wants to talk crap about. But as a dynasty manager, I love that. One, I mean, London is going to have a quarterback for a while. You got a couple years of Cousins minimum. And if they don't trust Penix after a couple of years, then Cousins will stay on the team. But typically, I mean, top 10 quarterbacks, they're going to get on the field within a couple of years. So I think it's only been a couple of them that even were able to sit for a full year or nearly a full year. Patrick Mahomes was one of them. So, like, buying London just, I mean, yeah, you're buying high at wide receiver 13, but he was the highest receiver in that draft class of Olave, of Garrett Wilson, all these guys. And he's shown all the potential. It's just quarterbacks and system weren't in place. Now they've got a fantastic system coming over. They're running the McVay offense this year, or some variation of it, with Kirk Cousins, who's shown he can support a high-end wide receiver one, even with a solid tight end like Kyle Pitts running in that TJ Hawkinson type role, because the Kevin O'Connell offense is probably the exact same thing as what Zach Robinson's looking to implement from a base perspective, at least. They both came up under McVay. So Cousins should be very, very comfortable in that offense. And everything coming out of Falcons camp has just been praise for all of those young guys, including Bijan Robinson. I think they could all have fantastic years. And, I mean, once you get those guys, assuming they can ascend into that CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson type tier, I mean, that's just so much extra value for your roster. So if you can bet on those guys, for the most part, they're fairly safe value-wise, because, like, they're still going to show you flashes regardless. They're still young. People love to make excuses for them. And so even if they struggle, they might lose a little bit of value, but you can always get out, which is kind of something we're going to talk about a little bit with some of these other receivers. People tend to prioritize the young guys. And, I mean, rightly so. Some aspects, that's the easiest way to get the breakout. But at the same time, being able to identify those guys that aren't hits is just as important as getting the ones who are. As someone who was heavily invested in Sky Moore, getting out from him after his first season was just hoping someone would give me, I don't know, 75 to 50 cents on the dollar for what I paid for him and re-roll in the rookie draft or something. Someone saying, oh, well, I'm buying him at a discount. Or in my case, I was selling before the bottom fell out. So you got to be, especially in Dynasty, make sure that you're paying attention to that and understand how quickly those Dynasty markets can change. So the next thing I want to hit on before we hop over to talk about some of those overinflated values is just embracing the unknown in the Dynasty market. So I'll give a couple examples I was looking into. And for instance, the Texans. Everyone loves CJ Stroud. Everyone's super high on that offense. I think he's top 2 quarterback. In many people's minds, top 2, top 3 Dynasty asset at this point. But his top receiver is Nico Collins at wide receiver 16. His second best is Tank Dell at 22. I think Diggs is in the mid to late 30s. So what that's saying is the market's not really sure who the top guy is, who to buy, who to sell. It's kind of pick your poison, and different people have different ideas of who they like. I mean, if Stroud is who we think he is, he ought to be able to support multiple. And with Dell and Collins both there for a while, it's very possible that both are fantastic players. Hello there. Welcome in. Sorry. Lost my train of thought for a sec. But you want to buy... Honestly, I'm willing to buy either Dell at 22 or Nico at 16. I think there's a shot both outperform where they're being drafted. So let's see if I can find an IDP comparable to that. If you believe in a guy like a Quay Walker, who I've talked about as a sell myself, but that's only because of Edgerrin Cooper being in there, the system change, all these different things. And while he's done a great job his first couple of years, I think he's been top 36 each of the first 2 years, it hasn't really hit at the high level that you were hoping for. And it's possible that the bottom falls out on him. But at the same time, that drives his price down a little bit because a lot of former first-round linebackers hold on to value for a few years. I'm just worried that if he doesn't hit this year, that it will fall out on him. But you could, with Edgerrin Cooper there, with Isaiah McDuffie back, you've got pieces around him where with the scheme change, maybe they can do a better job at putting him on the outside and using his strengths to his advantage rather than putting him in the middle of the defense. Another offense that I wanted to talk about real quick is the Seattle Seahawks. I'm really excited about the Seahawks. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Shannon. That was a bag the Titans or the Texans gave Collins. So, I mean, Dell's still on his rookie deal, same year as Stroud. So they're both there for 3 more years minimum. I mean, Stroud's not going anywhere for a long time. But I would imagine, based on how hard he pushed for Dell's going to be around for a while too. Personally, I'm just going to buy the cheaper one. So I'm reaching out to both managers, trying to find out their values on their own guys, because that's something that's always hard to do. Is yes, the consensus has like a ranking for everyone, but at the same time, getting to understand your league mates and how they value certain players is just as important. It's something I really haven't hit on, but if your guy doesn't believe in Tank Dell and he's like, oh, he got hurt at the end of the year, he's going to be injury prone because he's a little undersized. I mean, maybe that's true. I don't know. I'm not an injury expert, but I'm willing to take the shot on Dell and by the fact that he was, I think, top 10 in fantasy points per game when he was on the field. And to start the year, he and Collins, I think, were both playing the X receiver role, depending on the formation. I think Collins was on the field more in, I might get this backwards, one was more in the field in like 12 personnel, so 2 tight ends and 1 running back, 2 receivers, and the other one was more for 11 personnel, so 1 tight end, 1 running back, and 3 receivers. But I would expect those roles to all change. I actually think, if I were to guess, Collins will play X. Then I'm not sure which one of Dell or Diggs play flanker and which one plays slot. They might be a little more interchangeable. Sorry. Hop back. I was talking about the Seahawks was the other team that you could kind of make that same case for. So they had a bit of a down year. They invest heavily in their offensive line. They get a new OC in there who was the coach at Washington, had Michael Penix, and all those receivers get drafted really highly. And now he comes in and inherits DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett. Lockett is older. He's getting up there. But at the very least, I'm happy to buy DK Metcalf and JSN wherever I can. JSN had some of the best college metrics you could find. Just like yards per route run, targets per route run, all of these numbers were higher than pretty much any receiver in the last, 5 to 10 years. It was really impressive what he did at a big school like Ohio State. Everyone's probably seen the clip where Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave were talking about how he was the best receiver on the team. And people were drafting him last year. I think he was top 10 right after the draft on Keep Trade Cut. He's now down to wide receiver 25. I don't know why people didn't expect Lockett to at least start out the year as the guy over him. And as the year went on, I think Njigba missed a bunch of time in training camp too. So he was not as acclimated to the offense until partway through the year. And then as he came on, he was used horribly in Shane Waldron's offense, but you could see the talent. And when you see that, even if he's not putting up the huge fantasy numbers that you want, you can buy in on that. That's kind of thanks, Shannon. I knew I could count on the Seahawks fan to help me out. So he broke his finger in the last preseason game, and after that, kind of sat out for. I think he missed a few games, or if he didn't, he rushed back, so he wasn't fully healthy. And a broken finger for a receiver with the velocities they throw those footballs at, it's not easy to try and catch the ball with a broken finger. So all that to say, I'm buying both Metcalf and JSN at their prices. Like I said, JSN's down at 25. I think DK's in the early 20s. Both of those guys have the potential to be top 10 to 15. Metcalf's probably never going to wind up back up there for dynasty rankings, but he sits in the 10 to 15 range yearly, I think, for where he's kind of been finishing each of the last 4 seasons. So why is he down in the 20s for his overall value? So kind of to bounce off of that, the next point I kind of wanted to talk about was just the value inflation that you can see in certain players. And this is what I was kind of trying to hit on earlier when I was hint at earlier when I was talking about how the dynasty community views certain players. For instance, DK Metcalf's in the early 20s. Jordan Addison is, I think, wide receiver 24 or 26. He's right next to JSN. And you sit there and you're like, Addison just got a rookie quarterback. He's got TJ Hawkinson, and he's got the best receiver in football in Justin Jefferson. Most of his production came when Jefferson was out with Kirk Cousins. Essentially holding Addison into the season at this point, in my mind, you're asking for a value dip on Addison. He's someone I'm happy to sell. So some of the guys in that vicinity, JSN, like I said, George Pickens, Brian Thomas Jr., are all valued comparably. And I would take any of those guys over him. At best, he's third in the pecking order in targets, probably, and that's on that team once everyone's healthy. And you're still dealing with the unknown of Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy there. Even if you think McCarthy can long-term become Kirk Cousins, it's going to be a couple of years before the team really trusts him to do that. So you're likely taking a value hit. I just acquired him on a team in a rebuild. I didn't love doing it. I am not high on Addison at all, but just getting off of an older receiver to a younger receiver, something that I will typically do in reverse when I'm in a competitive build, because the receiver I traded away was Terry McLaurin. I would fully expect over the next couple of years, Terry McLaurin will outscore Jordan Addison per game and over the course of the year, assuming health. I guess those two go hand in hand, but why is McLaurin valued so much lower than Addison? Seeing the advantages of some of those guys that you can buy cheaper just because they've been around for a while and everyone wants to go buy the new name, the new upside shot. They think they can pick the next Tank Dell when they might wind up with the next Quentin Johnston. Especially if you're competitive. even if you're not buying a Deontay Johnson who's 27, McLaurin I think is 28, DK Metcalf I think is 26. Like you can buy some of these players and they aren't as expensive in the dynasty landscape because everyone wants to overvalue the young guys. That's why a lot of people will say, wait till you're on the clock to move your rookie picks, because that's when they peak in value, when someone can put a name to it. Be like, oh, I can get this guy here. Oh, I can get that guy. Especially at receiver. I am hesitant to do it at running back a little more so, especially because running back values just move so much. For the most part, they're all fairly interchangeable unless you have one of the elites, a Bijan, a Gibbs, a Brees Hall, a Christian McCaffrey. Those four are basically it. Those are the guys that I'm willing to pay up for. But the next group, I'm honestly more likely to move down, take the extra, what I'll call the inflation on there, get a similarly productive player. Kyren Williams is going to have his value depressed because they drafted Blake Corum. Guess what? I'm confident that Kyron's going to play probably in the 70-ish% snap share. He was up way higher than that a lot of games. He was up in the 90s early in the year, and that's when he got hurt. So the Rams drafted a backup to help him out. So Shandon said it's about momentum, positive, negative. When circumstances change, the momentum of preseason hasn't caught up to that. I mean, absolutely. Like Addison's a great example. He was hot down the stretch when Jefferson was hurt, when they needed to throw the ball. Now the Vikings bring in Aaron Jones. So they're going to run the ball more. Like I said, they've re-signed Jefferson to a huge deal. Hawkinson's going to miss the early part of the year, probably with his knee injury. But at the same time, when he comes back, he's still going to be ahead of Addison in the target pecking order. So that's why when you have the opportunity to sell a Jordan Addison, to buy a Will Anderson because he hasn't had the true breakout everyone thought, and people aren't patient enough to realize that a defensive end isn't going to break out in year one for the most part. Heck, even Aiden Hutchinson was fantastic last year and didn't put up the sack numbers down the stretch because he started getting doubled so much. So, like, you got to be careful just using the statistics that we use for fantasy football to accurately predict the future with fantasy football. So where I can, I'm happy to move off of guys. Not saying sell Will Anderson, by the way. I would buy him in a heartbeat. But just making sure you understand where the market's at on certain players and keeping open lines of communication with your league mates so you can take advantage of those fluff pieces that come out in the offseason talking about how this guy is going to be a huge part of the offense. All the talk about the Raiders using multiple backs and all this stuff, and now it seems more and more likely. We'll see when we get there, but Zamir White seems like he's going to be the bell cow there and take over that Jacobs role and do the same stuff he was doing down the stretch last year. So he's someone that you could buy for RB2 prices, which in Dynasty right now is very, very cheap, and buy a really good player who's got a role for at least 2 more years probably. Buy Ramondre Stevenson, who's about to sign an extension and probably playing the Nick Chubb role. You can get these guys for cheaper. Trade off of Addison, drop to a McLaurin, and maybe get one of these guys kicked in for a bench fodder piece that you don't need, a roster clogger type. So stuff like that, it hurts to see sometimes how some people dynasty. Hopefully that helps you. So again, trying to do a little theoretical while also relating it back to real life, and hopefully help you buy and sell a little better. Before we move on to the next piece, let's talk about draft night out. Like you need another reason to head to Canton for the Fantasy Football Expo in August, right? Yet here we are. Come join us on Saturday, August 10th, the Kettle Brew next to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for a drafting extravaganza. And for the first time ever, IDP Plus is hosting an IDP League. Be a part of history. Check out the link in the show description and get signed up today. All right. So now we'll move that and talk about IDP theory a little bit. So I kind of touched on this a little bit in the last section. The biggest thing for IDP for me is making sure that you understand how long it can take for players to hit. Like IDPs do not hit immediately. Most of them don't. If you do, you got really lucky. But you have to be patient with your IDPs when you draft them. That's why a lot of times you'll see people taking offensive players first, even if the IDPs could potentially outscore them or score similarly. You got to be patient. Even like I said, Will Anderson wasn't a huge hit last year. Aiden Hutchinson showed you everything you wanted to see, and he still didn't post the crazy sack numbers he's capable of. Will Anderson should see a huge bump this year. And the rest of that class last year, they're all still in pretty terrible situations. So just be careful with your Dallas Turners, with your Jared Verses, with your Lietu Latus. Those guys could take a little bit. Latu is the one that, if I were to pick one to have solid redraft value this year, he's the one. Everything he's put up in college kind of shows that he could come in and have a really good year, similar to what the Bosa brothers have done in the past. So he's the one I'd be most excited about in a redraft. But in general, redraft leagues kind of avoid those rookies. People love to take them and hope for the breakout, similar to what they do on offense. And it's such a low probability of hitting. And then in redraft or Dynasty, I'm taxing those guys as much as I can. So, however, that being said, I'm talking about IDP, how to build a roster and everything. The big thing for me is to build back to front. And what I mean by that is I'm building my defensive line first. That's my top priority. Then my linebackers, and then my DBs. Depending on format, if you have D tackles and cornerbacks delineated, it still kind of holds. I'm a little more likely, depending on how many of each position, you can kind of play with it a little bit. But for the most part, that's the easiest way to build. So I saw something that John Macri, who works over at PFF, put out a couple days ago on X, basically saying year-to-year correlation between different IDP positions. And essentially, the correlation is highest among defensive tackles, then edges, then linebackers, then corners, then safeties. So essentially, if a D tackle and a safety both had good years the year prior, it's way more likely that the D tackle is going to do it again than the safety. That's why I'm building front to back every time, because it's just it's all out there, all the data. You can go do this stuff for yourself if you would like to, but everything out there tells you buy the defensive lineman first, then go to the linebackers, then go to safeties or DBs. Most improved defensive line this offseason. I like the Raiders. That's a good call. I'm not sure they really helped themselves, but the Dolphins put a ton of resources into their edge position. It'll be curious to see what their rotation looks like, and if they want to put all of their edge guys on the field. I'm excited to see what the Eagles look like this coming season with year 2 Jalen Carter out there. They're going to help themselves just by all of their young guys just getting a year better. So it's going to just naturally improve a little bit. But just for what they've done, it probably is the Raiders. And then maybe the Eagles. I'm probably missing some, but it's hard for the Rams to improve when Aaron Donald leaves. But I like what they've done this offseason to replace him. It's hard. Like I said, I definitely wouldn't put them up there for most improved, but they definitely helped themselves a lot to become a better team long term, because that defensive line is going to be tough to stop as they grow together. So the big thing, we'll go through positional now a little bit on the IDP side, is with talking defensive linemen. What makes a defensive lineman great? So the big thing here is just understanding essentially that, for the most part, you're pretty much looking at draft capital. It's one of the best correlations between a player's ability to be a star and fantasy points per game. Like, that's what you want. It's one of the best indicators out there for defensive linemen is just draft capital, because more than the other IDP positions, it's about talent on the defensive line. The other ones, I would argue, are more about being on the field. That's why a guy like Bryce Huff can play, 40% of snaps and put up 10 sacks last year. But if your linebackers aren't playing a ton, they're not going to put up 100 tackles. I mean, Singleton was super efficient when he was not playing full snaps in Denver, but that's more of the outlier than the rule. And that's different than defensive line, where, talent does kind of shine through more on the defensive line. Wilson. Yeah, I'm excited to see. Honestly, I'm kind of curious to see how the Raiders deploy Wilson a little bit. If they continue to stick with a 4-3, he's big enough that they could kick him inside and keep Kuntz playing edge. So I think he'll kind of split his snaps a little bit between, Max Crosby likes to play every snap, but I don't know. I'm hoping they let him get enough run where they give him the opportunity to break out, at least show signs of the future being able to break out. But Wilson's a fun one that you can probably pick up in the late rounds that people will just kind of be out on because he struggled as a rookie, like in redraft leagues, or you can probably pick him up cheap in a trade. People in Dynasty are just so impatient, especially with how some of these receivers and quarterbacks are coming into the league and just setting the league on fire as rookies. Everyone's like, well, why can't the IDPs do that? It's just not how it works. I mean, you get the rare exceptions, but you need to be patient with your IDPs. So I was talking draft capital a little bit here. The better the draft capital, I forget some information on this. Basically, top 8, top 16, top 32 picks, second round, third round, and it falls off as they go along with where the defensive linemen kind of hit. And other thing I wanted to talk about that I saw on X was from an account called Football Insights at fball_insights. They posted something yesterday talking about pass rush win rate versus sack rate. And if you go find it, it's a fantastic chart to kind of show you who are buy lows, who are sell highs. And it's interesting. Trey Henderson is like so far above the line with his sack rate compared to his win rate for where the average would be, he's a huge regression candidate, no surprise. Josh Allen, TJ Watt are both Chargers, Bosa and Mack. Myles Garrett's actually on the other side of the line and should bounce back. Same with Nick Bosa, same with Aiden Hutchinson. Will Anderson, his pressure rate or win rate's a little lower, but he's also below the line. Parsons is right on the line. The interesting one to me, though, is Bryce Huff is right next to Micah Parsons. So Bryce Huff has this huge opportunity to just have a massive breakout coming up this year. Bobby Okereke or Oluokun in Dynasty. So it's a tough one to answer. For me, in a vacuum right now, I would take Okereke on my roster over Oluokun. However, I would actually argue that most will have Oluokun higher in their dynasty value. So I'm willing to do the deal straight up, but I think you can get more with Okereke than just one for one, I guess. If that makes sense. I do think Lloyd is going to take on a much bigger role. And I also worry that with the new coordinator down in Jacksonville did not play linebackers full-time much in Atlanta last year. Maybe that was just the linebackers he had. Nielsen, that's his name, sorry. Maybe it was just the guys he had there. He didn't want to play Caden Ellis full-time. Trey Anderson got hurt. But I worry that, one, Lloyd ascends and takes over for Oluokun, and two, like, will he play a full-time role, or will they cut him back to, I don't know, 80 to 90%, and then he's not the elite tackler that he was, whereas Okereke is actually, I believe, getting an upgrade because that Titans scheme, they just constantly produced high-end linebackers, and that's where Shane Bowen came over from, who I believe is the new Giants defensive coordinator. So I have high hopes for Okereke being on the field a ton, being in a really tackle-friendly defense for linebackers. So I actually think Okereke has an outside shot to be the leading tackler in the NFL this coming season. It wouldn't shock me. Let's see. Speaking of linebackers, let's hop on over and talk about linebackers. And like I was just kind of talking about there, it's kind of all about opportunity with linebackers. The biggest thing is them being on the field. And if they're on the field, they're going to get tackles. They're going to give you the statistics you're looking for the most part. There's some variation based on what schemes teams are running, how efficient they can be. But I do, yeah. I'm taking Okereke over Oluokun. So I was chatting with Joe, my old co-host. Hopefully he'll come back here soon. And so much about linebackers is, I mean, draft capital gives them some artificial value. So guys like Jack Campbell, even though he didn't perform well last year, is still highly valued. You're not getting what you bought him for. But same with Quay Walker. These guys, I mean, Walker at least was on the field more and having decent seasons. Campbell should play more this coming year. But it's not like the Lions lost any of their starters. And then the other thing with linebackers is so many people – I play a lot on Sleeper, and the platform just influences it so much too. And their rankings, they're at least better now, but they're still pretty bad. And ADP just don't keep up. So you're looking through and trying to find these deep sleepers at different positions. And I was talking earlier about 32-man league I'm in. And I'm expecting we have veterans as well as rookies in the rookie draft. I'm through my picks in the rookie draft. I don't have many. But one guy I'm kind of hoping slides through the cracks, hopefully none of the people are actually listening to this, is KJ Britt is like super low roster percentage, super low ADP. I'm just like what am I missing here? The dude balled out in the playoffs. Because it was in the playoffs, nobody saw it for their fantasy rosters. They were still playing Devin White more at that point. He hadn't gotten benched for Britt full-time yet. Britt pops off. The Buccaneers add nobody to their roster. And now Britt's set up to be the linebacker 2 there. He's only 25. I think this is going to be his 3rd or 4th season in the NFL. And the guy just is on nobody's radar. So like you have to hunt a little bit, but you can trade away linebackers for defensive linemen, for people who think it's all about linebackers. And then you go add a KJ Britt off of waivers who fills in for you for the year. And all of a sudden you've got like a solid linebacker too. We've seen leagues last year. Dorian Williams got picked highly, so a bunch of people moved on from. Wow, I'm blanking on his name. Terrell Bernard, and then he takes over as the starter there, and has a fantastic year, and is now, I think, borderline top 12 dynasty linebacker. So let's see. I got a couple questions. It's all good if it's off topic. I'm happy to talk about any deals. Would you trade Ridley for Aiden Hutchinson? If you're loaded at receiver, trade away Ridley for Hutchinson. Yeah, I would absolutely do that. Ridley should be good this year. I'm not the biggest Levis guy, so I think it's pretty easy to move off of him for Hutchinson. Depending on scoring, I would assume that your defensive line is going to score fairly similarly to your high-end receivers, in which case you're probably going to get more points from Hutchinson. Fair offer for a top IDP D-line if you wanted to go offense to defense. Oh, this is such a hard question to answer because it's so league specific. And scoring specific. Let's see. So a couple of years ago, I actually traded away in a league. I traded away Tony Pollard right when he was breaking out for the Cowboys and picked up Max Crosby plus like a 2nd round pick or something. So like it's going to depend on the manager and how they like their IDPs and everything. So I try to gauge interest a little bit with some of the guys that you're after and see. I wouldn't go high end for high end, but if you can go for like a mid-tier guy, I kind of like what Will's doing. Calvin Ridley for Aiden Hutchinson. You'll see people willing to do that the other way, thinking, oh, I can easily replace my IDPs. And if it were a lower tier player, absolutely. But Aiden Hutchinson's in the running for like edge 1 probably at the end of this season with Will Anderson in dynasty ranks. So like, I think you could probably sell a player in that kind of range. Maybe a running back like a Ramondre Stevenson type player where they're not elite, but they're good enough that someone's going to be interested in adding something like that to their roster. And also just paying attention to what that person needs. Like, are they heavier at receiver and need a running back? And then I could give up the running back to try to get the high-end IDP. Or if they need receivers, giving up the receiver. But I would not pay a high-end offensive player. If you think about it this way, so like a lot of our IDP plus startup mocks that we do, you'll typically see the top IDP guys, the top edges, the top linebackers start coming off the board in the 6th round range. So somewhere in the 70s of offensive players, if you were doing just an offensive startup, would be in the range of where those guys are going. Hopefully that helps you, Lincoln. So, and those values are usually pretty good with trading within a startup draft. So, okay, yeah, Pittman's a high price. That would be, he's well within that top, I don't know, probably top 40 to 30 minimum. I haven't done a startup this offseason, so I'm not too sure, but just what I was talking about on Lincoln's question, I would, yeah, that one's too far without getting something on top of Hutchinson back. So I wouldn't do that. Let me see. Had one more quick thing to talk about because we haven't touched on DBs. And really, DBs is fairly straightforward. You're looking for guys who play in the box, play near the line of scrimmage for tackles, and slot cornerbacks for tackles. That's the way I do it. If your scoring settings are different, you might be looking for interceptions or something. That's where you can probably go more towards those free safeties. But their tackle numbers are going to be depressed. So it's going to be more of a big swings week to week. Something like Deron Bland did last year where he's putting up these massive weeks because he's hitting pick sixes all the time. And then the next week he doesn't do anything. So just something to be aware of with that. Oh, goodness. You are making my life difficult because I love both of those players. I will take London in this side. Not that I don't love Neighbors, and he has huge upside, but it's pretty much the quarterback situation and the offensive situation around those two makes me think that London is going to hold his value, if not jump up into the top, I don't know, 6 maybe. But Neighbor, I also said earlier that Neighbor's value won't fall off all that much. So, wow, yeah, that's a difficult one. In a vacuum, I think I'm taking London just for the value that he's going to give me, additional value he's going to give me this coming season. But oof, that's a tough one. Let me see. So I don't think we have a ton of content coming out right now, but you can always, if you got more questions, shoot them over to mailbag@idpguys.org. I love answering questions when you're shooting them to me like this. So keep them coming. Email them to me. If you get a time crunch, just put it on there that you need it by a certain time. I got access to the email account. I can reply back even, and then talk about it on the show the following week anyway. So, yeah, keep those questions coming. Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing that. Neighbors, trading London for Neighbors. I'm not sure. It depends on the Neighbors manager, whether or not they'll do that one for one. I'm pretty sure I was looking at Keep Trade Cut earlier to get gauge for some of the receivers I was talking about earlier, and I'm pretty sure Neighbors is at 9 and London's at 13. They're pretty close. I think they might even be within the same tier, but I'm not sure. You can try it. Worst thing they say is no. They want a little bit more on top of it, but I don't think it's a wild offer. I'll put it that way. With that, though, give a little time if anyone wants to ask any more questions. But as always, go to idpguys.org for rankings, articles, snap count tool, whatever you're looking for. We've got it. Sign up for the newsletter. Michael Sicoli puts out great stuff every week, especially as we ramp up here into training camp. Next week's will be interesting too, with all the stuff coming out of mandatory mini camps. Discord server, you get access to our writers all the time. Follow me at JFryDP on X, and I'll be back next week, same time, same place. Neighbors definitely has a better target share opportunity, but that's only part of it. So much of that's going to depend on how much you see both teams throwing, because target share is just a percentage. So if the Falcons throw it, we'll use nice round numbers, 600 times, and Giants throw it 500 times, and target shares are like 25 and 23%. I think London would still come out ahead in targets, but it's all just going to be, it's going to be difficult. I actually think Neighbors can outproduce that this year, but because Wilson, I don't even think he was in the top 36 receivers last year. I think he was just outside it. So it's hard, especially I think London's still only 22 years old, so he's not old at all. But I'm not opposed to shooting your shot and getting that deal done. I think I actually did that deal in reverse earlier this offseason in the league. Picked up London for Neighbors, even though I love Neighbors. But yeah, it'll all depend a lot on Daniel Jones' health, because if he can bounce back to what he was a couple of years ago, he's far and away the best receiver that Neighbors is, that Jones has ever had. So I'm excited to see them play together and hopefully resurrect Jones's career. But we can talk more about Neighbors in London. Hopefully can find out that you got a deal done in a week. But till then, thanks everybody for hopping in, and I'll talk with you next week.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.